Make your customers the hero for the patient. Make it easy for them, make it easy for the patient, and you'll win.
Hello and welcome to the HealthTech Marketing Show. I'm your host, Adam Turinas, and today's episode is about patient-centricity. It's not a topic that we've actually ever covered specifically, although, it comes up all the time. It's clearly an important issue. And I want to thank you for listening. If you're the first time listening, please subscribe. If you're watching the YouTube, click the subscribe button. If you're listening to the episode, click the follow, and then you'll get access to 80 plus other episodes that we've published on everything from ABM, buyer journey, all kinds of different best practices in marketing. And you'll also get sort of all the other upcoming episodes that we've got planned for the next few months. I also want to give a big thank you to our longtime sponsors, the wonderful people from HIMSS. We're very grateful to you for your support. As I said, today's about patient centricity, and I've got two terrific guests. Adam Cherrington, who's the VP of Digital Health for KLAS. That's KLAS. You all know that. And also my colleague, Lea Chatham. Lea heads up content strategy, and she's an account director working across several clients with us. Most importantly, she is a long-time health tech marketing leader who Leah's probably forgotten more about patient centricity than I'll ever know. I mean, she really knows a lot of stuff. So with that, enough blather from me. Let's get right into the episode. Well, Adam and Lea, welcome to the show. It's great to have you here. I'm so excited to talk about patient centricity, such a big issue, not something that we've actually ever covered before, surprisingly. It's episode 82. You'd have thought we'd have got to it by now. Adam, you're pretty well known in the industry, but for those of you who don't know you, tell us about yourself and this KLAS company. How do you spell it? KLAS? Is that? I don't know. I've never heard.
KLAS. First of all, Adam, thrilled to be with you and Lea. This is a treat for me, and I'm excited to learn from you today. Adam Cherrington. I oversee our research in digital health and patient voice at KLAS Research. KLAS has been around 29 years now. Think of all the things that have changed in just the past 3 years, let alone 29 years. So healthcare is ever changing, and we hope that we're helping the industry by shining a light on the performance of technology and solutions in the industry. My role is to be part researcher, part consultant, and just bring what I can to help our provider friends and our vendor friends for that matter. We want healthcare to improve, and I love the spirit of abundance in healthcare. There's always a willingness to share and learn, and appreciate the good work you do to amplify that.
Well, I had the pleasure of working with KLAS in my life prior to Health Launchpad when I had a software company. And I think you and I talked a little bit, and I talked to some of your colleagues, and you're just a great professional organization to work with. And what I always love about KLAS is that the insights and the perspectives that you provide are based on customer feedback. And so I've always felt that there's a real objectivity to that and the quality of the feedback. And it's not surprising that the community, the healthcare IT community, people that our listeners are trying to sell to, see you as important in how they make decisions. And Lea, it's great to have you on the show. I can't remember if you've been on the show before. It's maybe the first time. So
one time before, I think. This is the second.
Oh, okay. Right. So tell the audience a bit about yourself and particularly about your background and why patient centricity has been such an important part of your thinking and passion of yours.
Yeah. So I've been in healthcare and health IT for about 25 years in marketing. And it kind of right in the middle of my career, I took a position as the person sort of doing marketing, patient education, patient engagement at a small integrated health system. So really shifting from focusing on, selling into provider organizations to thinking almost entirely about patient experience, regularly doing interviews and profiles of patients and their experiences, spending a lot of time with our providers talking about how to improve that, being unfortunately the person who often got the first round of complaints when a patient was unhappy. And so, so patient centricity in that sense became a pretty key piece of success in my role. And when I came back into health IT, it really was now sort of just a component of everything I thought about when I was thinking about marketing solutions. I was working for actually a best in class organization when we purchased a patient facing solution about 12 years ago. And it was one of the earliest kind of reminder communication type platforms out there for patients. And so that experience really allowed me to help us, merge that solution into our platform, really think about how to now market a B2B2C type solution that was being sold to practices, but for the intent of, working with patients. And then kind of carried that along. So after that, went to another, luckily, best in class organization that was sort of a patient facing B2B2C solution, and have worked with several since then. And really, that patient centric piece and thinking about the patient experience has played a pretty key role in most of my experience in marketing in this last 12 or 13 years, and thinking about that B2B2C piece, right? And how you kind of make all that work for both the organization and for their patients.
Yeah. And Lea, it's great. Now you're part of the Health Launchpad team. We're
Yes.
just heading up a lot of the work that we're doing around brand, around content strategy, and generally just being a phenomenal idea person. I learn new from every day, and I'm always like, oh, that's a good idea. Every day.
I wish the job could just be an idea person. That would be great.
Oh, there you go. I'll have to think about that. Well, we're talking about patient centricity. So for people who are not familiar with that, maybe, Adam, you could start by giving us a definition of that term.
It's an interesting chapter in healthcare because as patients, we see all of these wonderful consumer-friendly experiences outside of healthcare. And so the industry has been talking about being patient-centric for a while now. And I believe it originates from the triple aim, which has become the quadruple and the quintuple aim. We agree that healthcare is broken and it needs a way to improve. And as an industry, we decided, hey, we need to improve the experience. We need to reduce the costs. We need to make sure the quality is improved. And subsequently, the clinician's experience is good. And we're reaching all patients and reaching out to those that need help. So because of that, we've collectively agreed healthcare needs to be more focused on the needs and expectations of the patient. I believe it's been a tagline and a buzzword at times, but it feels like we're really trying to slow down and pause and say, okay, what does this really look like? What should it look like? And it's good for healthcare to know me as a patient, to remember me, to treat me like a valued customer. I don't love the word customer in healthcare as a patient, but I think we're striving for that kind of Disney-like experience. It's interesting how well brands know us outside of healthcare, but in some of the most intimate, important exchanges in our lives, we're kind of treated like a number at times. So to me, patient centricity is that effort to really focus on the individual as best we can. It can be daunting when there's literally millions of lives that you're responsible for. But if we can start to segment, if think about good marketing principles, if we can segment and target and position and really focus on what does Adam need? What does Lea need? Someday we'll get there. And I'm happy to see examples where that's improving.
And the listeners of this podcast are mostly marketing people in healthcare technology. And for some of them, why you should care is obvious. Like if you have a solution which touches the patient, as Lea described, the B2B2C type application, it makes perfect sense. But let's say you sell an interoperability solution. Why should you care?
I love the question. And I'm going to go outside of healthcare as an example, how this is already thriving in many industries and why it makes sense. And Lea started to talk about this. It's a B2B2C relationship. And that C stakeholder is an essential part of it. So let's think about Airbnb. They have multiple stakeholders they serve. They're trying to work with property owners to have a platform to market and promote their properties. So there's the B2B relationship. But if you don't make it easy for the consumer, that C stakeholder, you're missing out on the end user. You're missing out on the third leg of the stool, if you will. And it can't be as successful as it might otherwise. I think of Uber as another example. Uber has to cater to the drivers and make it a business relationship and a successful relationship with other drivers. But the end user is the passenger. So,
I mean, I get that, but let's say you're a technology company that just sells the B2B part of it. It's clear, like you're selling an interoperability solution. Why would you care about the next leg, which is the provider to patient aspect of it?
So if you have the best tools in the world and they're not meeting the needs of the end user, does it matter? Does it make an impact? If interoperability, which is a crucial issue in healthcare, comes up often on our research calls, if that is still not meeting the needs of a patient, how can it be as effective as possible? So I'll use a basic example of faxing. We know that faxing is a need in healthcare. Clinician to clinician.
Crazy, isn't it? Yeah.
It is crazy, but it still exists among providers. And I think it might continue for a while. But now we take that same interoperability, if you will, and throw it on the patient's responsibility. And all of a sudden, we are having a crazy experience. Months ago, my daughter was told by a clinician, we need you to fax over this information. And she's in her early 20s. And she said, Dad, what do I do? And I said, why don't you call him back and ask what a fax machine is? So
you know what the answer is? I can't. It's because where I live. And the doctor would then say, well, where is it you live? He said, I live in 2025.
There you go. I love that answer. I love it. But the reason it matters now, her experience is flawed and she's susceptible to go somewhere else because of that. And so that's why it matters.
That's a great way of thinking about it. Yeah.
They vote with their feet. They vote with their dollar. Yes, healthcare is unique because sometimes we don't have other choices, but our choices are growing. We have more choices now.
Yeah. And I think I'll add to that. The EHR is also a great example of this, right? That we initially said we're building these to make everything better for providers and for patients, and you're going to have more secure data and everything's going to be electronic. And in the end, really, now everybody says, well, they clearly weren't built for providers or for patients. They were built just to house data and maybe improve billing, right? But it's a burnout factor for physicians. Patients get very upset when their physician sits in the room typing away and not looking at them, right? In fact, it made that interaction between providers and patients worse in a lot of cases. And now we're solving for the problems that were created by making everybody, obviously there's benefits to the EHR. Nobody's saying they're not, but it did create as many problems as it solved. And while it was never intended to be something really about the patient experience, it ended up having a huge impact on the patient experience. Yeah. And because nobody thought about that, right, it just continued to kind of become more and more of an issue for patients.
Such a great example. And it's very interesting, having worked with companies like DeepScribe, that are ambient AI solutions that solve both sides of the problem. So for those of you who don't know it, companies like DeepScribe and Abridge and Nuance, what they do is it sits in the background, records the conversation between the patient and the physician, transcribes it, and then allows the physician to then put it in the record. So the physician, rather than sitting basically facing away from the patient and typing, looking at the screen, can actually look at the patient in the eye and actually have a real conversation with them. And from the patient's perspective, they're therefore getting a better experience. So reduces burnout on the physician feels more fulfilled in what they're doing. And more importantly, as importantly, the patient feels like they're getting a much better experience. So it is a great example of that. And how EHR is solving a problem of patient centricity in the EHR, but it's also, interoperability plays a part there in the background because it's moving records around so that the patients information is there when it's needed. Lea, you've been on the front lines of this issue in some of the companies that you've worked at. Give us some example of solving a real patient-centric problem.
So I think one of them has been in all the companies that I worked with that focused on sort of a, business to business, then to patient type platform was really how do you create opportunities to engage and communicate with patients that make sense for them? And it's funny that we talked about the fax piece because email sort of started to become like that too, right? People were like, well, I don't use email anymore. Younger generations don't really use email. That's not a thing for them. And so companies that were thinking about that had been maybe previously doing this via email and phone calls where there are a lot, I can't remember the statistic, but the number of people who don't even have a landline anymore has increased exponentially, right? Every year for like the last decade. You had to really start thinking about, okay, well, so what is the answer? The answer is probably SMS, text messaging, right? Mobile notifications and things like that. But then how do you build those solutions without necessarily creating sort of app fatigue? Because now we've seen in some of Chime's research that healthcare organizations can have as many as like 40 different patient-facing solutions. So really like thinking about what is the problem that the CIO is facing? Well, they've got 40 solutions and that's kind of untenable, right? And that's a problem then for their patients and their patient experience. How can you as a vendor become a solution that maybe helps to reduce the number of solutions or integrate more solutions together? And then really think about when you do that, how do you still make that a very engaging solution that people want to use? And then you got to figure out how to make sure enough people will adopt it that you can tell a compelling story and show now that it has some kind of hard ROI, which you didn't used to have to do.
Yeah.
It used to be you could say, oh, we can get patients to engage and it'll improve their experience and you'll get better ratings or something, right? And that was enough. Now you need to do all that and you have to show like hard return on value, return on investment. You can only really do that if you really understand what patients are looking for, what they care about, what kind of solution they'll actually use and keep using. Because there's the downloading piece or the I initially engage piece, and then there's the I keep engaging piece, which are two sort of separate, different things.
Very interesting. I love the way you broke that down. And I think there's some very important themes in there for marketers. Adam, you're always conducting research, but you recently had I think a patient-centricity or a patient engagement summit. I'm curious some of the key findings that came out of that, things that maybe new insights for marketers out there who can say, I didn't know about that.
Historically, from our research, we've learned that the patient's perspective is different. And we just concluded a patient and consumer innovation summit, and we intentionally started it with a patient panel to prove that point. And we had, some of your listeners will know Erica Olinsky from FinPartner. She was on the panel. She's had multiple health journeys in her family. We had the wife of one of our colleagues who's in a cancer journey, Amy Cragen. And then we had the CIO of Salt Lake City, someone not in healthcare, but deep into tech. My good friend, Aaron Bentley, who his family's had pretty much any healthcare journey you can name. And they almost turned to themselves and started to share things that were working, how to navigate healthcare as a patient. And so one of the key learnings was, hey, patients want to engage and they are interested and they need additional insights and tech and guidance. Here's a couple of examples. The patients were talking about, hey, how can we use AI to interpret data that's coming from the health system to help me understand what's in the portal and my test results? And they talked about an idea that providers should share patient-friendly summaries of things like this. That's remarkable because a lot of that information goes to the clinician and it's not written in a way that is consumer-friendly. These patients talked about wanting more education. And they brought up an example of Apple micro-learnings. When a new feature is released, a consumer can quickly learn and use the new feature. Another learning that was fascinating to me, we asked the industry leading up to this summit, hey, how often are you involving patients' perspectives at some level to understand their needs? And it was quite a high percentage that said they're doing something. It was over 85%, which surprised me a little bit. I wonder if it was a bit inflated because all of us might say, oh, yeah, well, I listen to patients. Of course I do. When we've done research on things like digital rounding, we've learned, as an example in comparison, when you ask a floor, are you rounding on patients? The percentage is very, very high. And then when you have a technology to actually measure it, it's actually cut in half. It's like, well, you're not rounding as much as you might think you are. But I applaud any effort, whether it's through a patient family advisory council, online surveys. Things are happening. I think organizations understand the importance of this. So it's been very rewarding to see the progress that's actually happening. Organizations want to be patient-centric.
Are there any organizations that you can single out as saying, these guys are sort of really sort of best in class or top, really great examples of being patient-centric and that translating into the impact it's having on their bottom line?
Yeah, I'll just mention a couple examples that I've learned recently. I'm impressed what Upfront by Health Catalyst is doing. They have some leadership that came out of Procter and Gamble. You think about consumer-centric practices. P&G's known for that, right? They live in the house of the consumer for a time and watch them do dishes. How do they do the dishes? And so taking that kind of concept and having these personalization models and psychographics, I'm impressed with that level of patient centricity. Another firm called Vital has tools that inform families of the progress of a patient. We're measuring them in the ER. And think about what's going through the minds of family and friends of people in the ER. How long is it going to be? How are they doing? What's being talked about? One of their customers recently told us they have a doctor to patient translator. And essentially the solution runs through an AI program and explains some of the results. I think that's very patient centric. And there's many other examples, but those are two that come to mind right away.
Those use cases. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm impressed.
Lea, in your time on the, in being a head of marketing, I mean, how did you bring the patient voice into what you did?
So like we talked about, I really felt like it was important. We really think about that end user patient experience. And I felt lucky in a couple of scenarios where I was in companies that had been founded by people because they'd had some kind of patient experience that was a challenge. So as Adam knows, Solution Reach, which is based in Utah near KLAS, their founder had a pretty significant issue that really influenced his decision to start that company and look at text messaging as sort of an innovation at the time. It was 20 something years ago when text messaging was really new. So I was pretty lucky in some cases to have someone else at the C-suite or founder level who really wanted to bring the patient voice in, which I think is really helpful. And if you don't have that, my recommendation is really try to work on building that kind of support internally for your C-suite and get them on board with wanting to hear that patient experience, patient voice. I myself had some experiences that I was able to share personally. So I was able to say, like, as a patient, this is my experience. And then we were able to start looking at how we could bring more patient voices into our marketing specifically. So at Solution Reach, for example, we actually brought in several patient advocates. So Grace Cordovano and a couple of others who started regularly blogging for us and giving us feedback and input and sharing their experiences with us. And that helped us not only kind of give our clients and prospects some great insights on how to do better, but also helped us think about in our own product development, how could we do better? So I tried to do that in multiple companies. Like, hey, since we are patient facing, let's really try to pull that patient voice in both for ourselves and for our clients to help them. I always take advantage and have for years of the Savvy Co-op, since they've been doing these great sort of patient feedback opportunities at Health and Vive and other events where you can make an appointment to sit down with a patient who has a specific kind of background or specific kind of experience and actually show them your solution or talk about your innovations or talk about your future plans, product planning, and get their input and feedback. And sometimes you feel like, oh man, I was right on. They love it. And other times they're like, yeah, I don't know. This is what I would say about that. But then, you get to take that feedback back to your product folks and say, hey, we might have an issue here. Let's kind of do some more research on this and look into it more. So
for the listeners out there who are marketing to IT, who are healthcare technology decision makers, the C-suite or the CIO of a healthcare organization, what are the kind of data points and insights that really are effective in marketing and helping to kind of position a vendor to win a deal?
Well, I think there's a few. I think there are, like we were saying, so there is a much bigger focus on hard ROI today than there used to be. But that does not necessarily mean that there's not also still a focus on kind of value and experience too. So I think one of the most critical things today is finding the right balance between the two. You don't sort of stop talking about the experience side just because you're now sort of talking more about the ROI side. So you have to find a balance between so for example, you might say 2/3 of patients say they really want to have everything in one place and they want that to be something they can access both on mobile and on a desktop computer. So you want to obviously be able to say that you can deliver that. And you may have data and statistics that say you deliver that and that can show the level of engagement that patients have and what their feedback is. And that's really more of the experience and value piece. On the flip side, you also need to be able to show a hard return on something like, and those patients are booking more appointments, or more commercially insured patients are booking appointments, and actually show how you go from just engaging and improving experience down funnel through the process of actually taking action.
Yeah.
So whether that action is something that is like sites of care, right? For some people, sites of care is huge. They really want people to be going to primary care, urgent care, and not to the emergency department. So maybe that you can show we significantly reduced ED visits and increased people going to primary care. Or it might be, we really increased by X% the number of commercially insured patients who generate more revenue over Medicare, Medicaid patients or something like that. So you have to be able to show a whole continuum now of engagement, experience, and actually delivering on what's important to that health system, whatever their goals may be around access or revenue or reduced no-shows or reduced denials or things like that.
Very, very helpful. I love that sort of simple translation of patient impact on patient translate into sort of bottom line impact for the healthcare system, and it really addressing very specific use cases. And to put yourself in the shoes of the audience here, of sort of you're the head of marketing of a technology company that's selling to a healthcare system. What would you say are sort of 2 or 3 top best practices that they should be thinking about to make their marketing more patient-centric in a way that convinces decision makers to take action?
I think you really have to you have to apply sound marketing principles. And here's what I mean. Marketing 101 teaches us you cannot assume that you are the customer. You have to remove yourself from that. You have to ask. And that has to be part of any development, deployment, training, rollout of patient-facing tools. It can be a well-designed, beautiful package. If they're not going to use it, if it doesn't meet their needs, adoption won't happen and ultimately it won't survive. So you have to really make sure that you're listening to patients. I love some of the examples that Lea gave. It's really, really important. I think of, again, I'm going to go outside of healthcare and try to bring in a couple principles. I'm a fan of Coke Zero and the campaign happening of share a Coke. I think they're making heroes of people. Here's what I mean. Coca-Cola is working with the distributors to make a program or campaign that makes them win and they become a hero. If I go to the store, this is a plug, maybe I'll get a free can of soda out of this.
At least a 6-pack, Adam.
At least. If I see share a Coke with Lea, I'm probably going to buy that. And now I become a hero. So as you can not only create something, but train and guide the stakeholders to be successful, that's what's needed.
Yep.
It's not about the technology. It's about change management. I'm sure we're going to talk about patient self-scheduling. That comes up often as a high priority for patients. And it's not a new technology. So making it successful for the physician, making it successful for the staff, make it successful for the patient. All of a sudden, you've got a product that endures. You've got satisfaction for the staff, for the patient. You've got increased compliance on both sides. So it's really about understanding you have to address the needs of all parties.
I think there's something in there which makes a lot of sense, which is, as a patient-centric vendor, you're an expert in how to get patients to adopt your solution and use it properly. And so you're therefore an expert in teaching your customers on how to use it. And so that then translates into thought leadership, how-tos, educational type of content, and implementation type of content, right? Sort of as you think about the buyer journey, and the early part of the buyer journey, it's about education. The mid part of the journey, it's about understanding the pros and cons of different solutions. And then the latter stage, it's about best practice and implementation and how that translates into success.
Can I offer another example? We heard from a provider that was talking about their EHR vendor that also provided their patient portal. And this doesn't always happen, but the patients started to recognize the brand of the portal, and they would go to the vendor's website for support instead of the health system's website. Now, they had a choice to make. They could have deflected that and said, you need to go to your doctor. They can help you. But this firm embraced it, and they started providing support for patients. Now the vendor's the hero, the provider's the hero, the patient's needs are met, adoption is maintained, etc. So that's an example where we can do more and think about the end user. Yes, they may not be purchasing, but their approval is critical for the success of these products.
Yeah. And I'll add, kind of going back to Adam's example about scheduling. This is sort of the bane of all health IT people. I think anyone who touches scheduling, right? This is one of the big patient-centric and improvement challenges in healthcare. The change management part is really hard. It's very hard to get physicians on board with open scheduling. And one of the things when we were talking about data earlier, we did not talk about this sort of middle chunk of data, which is how you can use data to get people within an organization more invested and more on board with a solution. Because if you don't have them on board, you're not even going to be able to get the patients, right? And I have had some organizations that I've worked with in the past, healthcare organizations, who, when they were able to go to their providers and say, here's an example of our earliest providers using this open scheduling and what happened. And then being able to show that they had far fewer MD appointments, that patients were able to be seen earlier, that the patient feedback was incredibly positive, right? Multiple kind of data points that they were able to share with the other providers. The providers were much more receptive then to being able to open up their schedules and do more online scheduling. And so as a vendor, a lot of times you have to think about kind of multiple layers of data and storytelling and where and how you're going to sell these solutions kind of across different stages of the buying and implementation process to help them kind of get across the finish line. It's not always just what you say kind of in the beginning to sell the product. Sometimes then you got to help them get the data and information they need to sell it internally and make it more successful, and then be able to market it and get that uptake that they want on the patient side. So it's a lot of different levels of storytelling and data.
I could not agree more. I like how you're saying multiple layers and storytelling. I think there's aligned outcomes that they can chase. If you think about it, missed appointments, that's something health systems and providers are trying to figure out. Well, patients want to get in. They want to come.
Yeah.
So there's some alignment there. To your point about data can help solve these things, let me give a quick example. I heard from a gentleman at Becker's a couple years ago who worked for Phoenix Children's. And they looked at the data that showed they were losing 2/3 of their own existing patients. These aren't even new patients, people that had engaged with them. They were losing them because of the complications of scheduling. And they took that data. The chief medical officer went to each of the clinicians and said, we are going to change how we do scheduling. Because to your point, that is a major barrier. Clinicians won't open up their schedule, but using that data, they were able to make a change, and CAP scores, or, the patient satisfaction scores, they went through the roof. They were able to get over 80% of patient scheduling online. So patients are happier, clinician schedules are full. I couldn't agree more with what you said. I've seen examples of it.
But it is about, it's change management. There's a level of complexity in healthcare, which anybody outside of this industry just doesn't really understand.
The amount of buy-in you need, the number of people you need to get it from.
There's a reason why everybody says healthcare is hard. Before we go to closing thoughts, it would be remiss not to talk about AI. I'm curious, Adam, obviously AI is making a big impact on healthcare technology. What are some of the AI things that are going on that you're most excited about?
In my corner of healthcare tech, I'm hearing more about agentic AI. And think of the word agent. This is still being defined. I think there's a lot of slogans out there that are saying this is what it is, or that's what it means. And we're about to go measure that and validate. As of this moment, this recording, I know more vendors than I do providers on this topic. So think of these tools that can solve some of these patient basic needs, communication, scheduling, ordering, that can relieve the provider burden. A lot of digital front door type tools. It just makes sense to me. There's such a workforce shortage and costs and so forth. And I've experienced this as a patient. I call in to order medical supplies on something. They pick up on the first ring. They know who I am before I even start talking. Is this Adam? Do you still have this insurance? Yes. Great. What do you need? And it's a better experience. And I think it allows the staff and others to work at the top of their license. Can they be more available to handle complex questions and issues? Some of the other trends and things we're seeing, patient engagement platforms. Lea was talking about this, that can we reduce the touch points and help patients through one tool? One of our panels at our summit a few weeks ago, a clinician said they did an audit on just their communication tools. They had 27 different tools to communicate with patients. So they are currently in a departmental centric world, and they're trying to get to patient centric. The billing wants to talk to you. The insurance wants to talk to you. The clinician, the front staff, there's all these tools. And I think patients say, this is crazy. Can you imagine if we did that in the transportation industry? The flight attendant wants you to do this. The mechanic wants you to fill out this survey. You need to pay the pilot separate. So
it's insane and frustrating.
Yes.
Lea, how about you? Any technologies, AI or other, that you're excited about? So some of the things that maybe some of the stuff you're working.
Well, I think there's two places where I'm and I think I want to sort of preface this by saying, and Adam, I think, knows this to be true too. For years, we've been sort of saying the best places for AI right now are really around things like experience and billing and places where you're removing a lot of sort of tedious, repetitive kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And we've been talking about the potential, right, for this sort of agentic AI piece that Adam was talking about, as well as personalization. So we've been talking about the potential opportunities that exist in personalization in mobile apps and text messaging for a while, like the ability to have a patient come in for surgery, you send them home, and there's sort of this automated AI experience that starts sending them messages like, hey, we're checking on your pain level. Can you let us know what it is? Okay, do you need a refill on your medication? Did you book your appointment with the PT? And then a week later, like, how's your pain level now? Right. And we've got your follow-up appointment, and you're getting these really consistent, steady, they're very specific and personalized to you, whether that's in text or that's in a mobile app. And I think we're finally reaching the point where we're starting to see that come together, that there's an AI piece that's advanced enough now to begin really giving people those kinds of experiences. I think the other one is sort of the next step up from what you were talking about earlier around AI scribes and similar types of technology. And we have a client who is working on a solution like that in the long-term care space. And one of the most interesting things I have heard from them is
Mm.
not only does it help them with transcribe the notes, show me the notes, I approve the notes, but they also have the ability to do prompts like, now summarize this and send it to the care coordinator, and summarize this for the patient's family caregiver and send it to them through email or through a portal or whatever technology you're using. And that really resonated to me as someone who has had parents in long-term care going through multiple health issues, which become very complex.
Mm.
And that experience can become really stressful for patients and for their families. And the idea that you could get really consistently steady, simplified, accurate information, like Adam was saying, where it's like it's been simplified down and translated for the patient or for the patient's caregiver in a way that is actionable for them, is like a game changer to me, I think, in the sense of what AI can be doing for people to make life actually a little bit easier in the healthcare world.
That's a great example. As anybody who's followed anything I do knows, I'm a little bit obsessed about AI. But actually, I want to call out one which is not so much an AI play, but really is, it's a pure play, patient-centric play. It's our clients at Alica Health. And what I love about what they're doing is that they're solving one of the biggest problems in healthcare, which is how do you help a patient, who's cardiovascular disease, bridge the gaps between their visits to their physicians. So they're not going to see a physician on a daily basis. So how do you, a patient who wants to manage their own care, how do you help them do that? And I think they've got a wonderful solution for that. And there's a bit of AI playing in the background, but it is mostly about just totally understanding both sides of the experience here. From the founder is a cardiologist, but he totally understands what the patient's going through. And I think they've got a wonderful solution for that. So people should check that out. Okay, closing thoughts here. So Lea, let you go first. Any closing thoughts, any resources that your fellow marketers should think about? And then Adam will give you the last shot.
Yeah, I do think that it is well worth taking the time to look at reports like ones coming out of KLAS and other analyst organizations that are more focused on kind of patient voice, that are more patient-centric, that really there are several that, kind of each year do reports on kind of patient expectations, patient engagement, things like that, and really think about, where within what you do that stuff makes sense or matters for you and your storytelling. I also think for organizations that really truly have a solution that is utilized by patients, where that patient facing piece is really critical, I'm a big believer in doing your own owned data and research as well, right? About your own solutions and how they're being utilized and how effective they are, where you can improve. The best way, obviously, to make your solution better is to get data from the people who are using it, and they can tell you how to make it better. So I think that's really important. And again, I would say it's incredibly helpful to partner with patient advocates who can also give you insights and feedback and share, their ideas around best practices.
So true.
Lea, love that. Thanks for teaching me today. I appreciate what you're doing. And as far as some resources, there's great champions out there that really promote and talk about this. Adrian Boise, a lot of your listeners might know. Christy Dickinson, we mentioned Eric Olinsky. Colin Hung, he talks about patient centricity a lot. I don't know Stacy Hurt, but I admire her focus. She talks about patient centricity in clinical trials. Healthcare IT Today, John Lynn, they put out an article just this morning on listening to patients. And Health Launchpad, listen to Health Launchpad. There's amazing tools and resources there. So really appreciate what you do in that space. The Barrel Institute, very focused on patient experience. And there's
sign up for they've got sort of like a regular, it's not a newsletter, but it's like a little thing they do every so many months where they often will summarize research on kind of patient facing stuff. Yeah. Barrel Institute is great. Like I said earlier, Grace Cordovano, Dave DeBronckhart, Amanda Green is great. High Tea with Grace which is the other Grace, is also a great resource for more patient. She does a lot of pieces on patient engagement, patient experience. There's a lot of good resources out there.
It's a great community, a lot of abundance. We are about to publish a patient-centric playbook out of our summit. And anyone that wants a copy, just message me on LinkedIn. I'll happily share that. It'll publish in a few weeks. And then, if I had any final advice, I would say this will complement something Lea just said. You need data. And out of our summit, someone said, hey, why don't vendors go round on patients with their provider customers? I thought that was brilliant. Go look in their eyes and see what they need and want. Make your customers the hero for the patient. Make it easy for them, make it easy for the patient, and you'll win. We need to compare the patient preferences with the provider preferences. They are different. They are not the same. And finally, when someone makes a broad statement like, hey, our patients won't do that thing, I hope we raise our hand and say, how do we know that? Can we challenge some assumptions? It's a historic assumption that older patients won't use technology. I don't think that's true. They're some of the highest adopters of technology. There's assumptions that all patients behave the same. We don't believe that either. We've done projects with health systems where we can see the differences based on demographics. And we have to always challenge the assumption, hey, we're all patients, so we know what they want. You have to remove yourself from that and say, hey, how can we do this differently? It's the path to improve healthcare. And I think it's the path to help your customers, your provider customers win, and ultimately help all of us as patients win.
What a wonderful way to conclude this great discussion. I've learned so much from both of you. I want to thank you both for taking the time today. Adam, to you and to everybody at KLAS, thank you for what you guys do. 29 years well spent. I'm looking forward to the next 290.
I don't know what we would do with all that without all that great information from KLAS. I feel like not only do I learn something from Adam every time we're together, but I feel like I'm always learning from KLAS all the time, right? All the data and information and resources. It's an amazing organization.
So agree. And Lea, thank you so much to you for taking the time today and sharing some of your past experiences. It's just wonderful hearing those stories. So I'm going to bid you both adieu. If you're listening, stay on. I'm going to tell you how to get all of links to all of the different people and some other stuff that you want to stay on. But Adam and Lea, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Wow. I learned so much. And this is something that I've been very passionate about for a long time. And for health tech marketing folks like yourselves who are out there listening to this, we want to make this as actionable as possible. So if you look down in the show notes down below, what you're actually going to see is a link to a best practice article that we've written, which translates a lot of what Adam and Lea have been talking about into things that you as a marketing person can actually sort of take action on. So we're trying to make this as actionable as possible for you. We've also tried to provide links to all of the various people and resources that Adam and Lea have mentioned. So it's quite a long list, and I hope you find that helpful. And do get in touch with Adam if you want to get hold of that patient playbook. I think it's going to be well worth it. And, hey, you know what? If you're out there and you're thinking about patient centricity or any other particular marketing problem, how do I grow my pipeline? How do I get to grips with changes in buyer behavior? What do I do about all the uncertainty that's going on in the economy? We'd love to help. So you can reach me at adam@healthlaunchpad.com or click through a link in the show notes below, and we'd love to set up some time with you. I hope you found this helpful. Do subscribe. Plenty more of these episodes to come.